January 19th, 2026, Hard Rock Stadium, the Miami Hurricanes home turf. Indiana 27, Miami 21. Hoosiers get their first national championship 16-0. The program, with one of the worst winning percentages in major college football history, just finished a perfect 16-0 season, the first 16-0 season at the top level since Yale in 1894. ESPN found Curt Cignetti. We won the national championship at Indiana University. It can be done. But here's the bajillion-dollar question. How do you know it can be done? How do you walk into one of the worst programs in the history of the sport and actually believe that you can build something unstoppable? Ignore the playbooks and the schemes for a moment. Even the prestigious Saban coaching tree is just a footnote here. The true catalyst is a specific, almost predatory, psychological DNA. It's the common thread through every machine that has ever dominated this sport. Cignetti carries it. So did other coaches you may not have heard of. Fielding Yost, Gil Dobie, and Robert Neyland. It's a line of perfectionism that goes back 100 years. When Cignetti was introduced as Indiana's coach in December 2023, a reporter asked him what he saw as his biggest challenge. The program had gone 3-9, before that 4-8, before that 2-10. Indiana was where coaching's careers went to die. Cignetti's answer, changing the way people think. He didn't list the usual obstacles. He ignored the recruiting rankings, the aging facilities, and the NIL deficit. He pointed to a single invisible barrier, changing the psychology of a losing culture. A few weeks later, he was asked what recruits and fans should expect from him. His response was the now signature phrase, "I win. Google me." Most coaches would never say that. They'd hedge. They'd talk about building a foundation or trusting the process. They would carefully manage expectations to protect their job security. Cignetti doesn't hedge. He states facts and dares you to disagree. That mentality isn't new. It's been building dynasties for 125 years. Gil Dobie was born in Hastings, Minnesota in 1878. His mother died when he was 4. His father died when he was 8. His stepmother sent him to an orphanage, more military outpost than home. He was indentured out as child labor to 4 different families. It was, by every account, a loveless and bleak existence. Dobie escaped. He clawed his way to a law degree, and then he found football. In 1908, Washington hired him as head coach. For the next 9 years, he never lost a game. His record was 58-0-3. His teams outscored opponents 1,930 to 118. Nearly 70% of his games were shutouts. The newspapers called him Gloomy Gil because of his pessimistic predictions before games. But that was a manipulation, a tool. The pessimism was a whip for his players and a smokescreen for his opponents. Inside, Dobie was absolutely certain he would win. In one game, Washington beat a rival 73-0. After the game, Dobie, disturbed by incidental mistakes, made the entire squad run laps around the field. His players, to a man, said the same thing about him. They simultaneously loved him, hated him, feared him, and resented him. One of them, Maxwell Eakins, put it simply, "Practice was the toughest part. At least while we were playing on Saturday, we had some fun. Dobie drove us hard, but there was great satisfaction in the end. We always won." That's the deal these coaches offer. They demand everything. In return, they deliver. When Dobie died in 1948, the minister at his funeral described his life as the virtue of perfection in doing all things. Fielding Yost arrived at Michigan in 1901. Much like Indiana, Michigan was a nobody in 1901. Within 12 months, the team outscored opponents 550-0. 11 games, not a single point allowed. From 1901 to 1905, his point-a-minute teams went 55-1-1 and outscored opponents 2,821 to 42. How did he do it? He never stopped moving. He never let anyone catch their breath. Hurry up, he'd yell during practice. Hurry up and be the first man down the field. He earned the nickname Hurry Up Yost. His quarterback called the next play while the team was still getting up from the last one. Opponents couldn't process what was happening fast enough to respond. In the first ever Rose Bowl in 1902, Michigan dismantled Stanford 49-0. Stanford surrendered and the game ended with 8 minutes left on the clock. Yost didn't just win the game, he killed the event. The Tournament of Roses committee, organizers of the event, were so horrified that they canceled the Rose Bowl for the next 14 years. They decided crowds would rather watch chariot and ostrich racing than see another beatdown like that. Yost wasn't just fast, he was obsessive. He'd stop players randomly and quiz them. Where should you be on that play? If they couldn't answer instantly, he'd drill it into them until they could. He couldn't turn it off. He was known to stop on street corners in Ann Arbor, blocking the sidewalk to replay games. He would physically reenact plays, pantomiming blocks and tackles in his three-piece suit, oblivious to the traffic, lecturing anyone who would listen about a game that had ended 3 days earlier. The game consumed him, and he believed without a shred of doubt that he was the most important figure in football's development. Sports writer Grantland Rice once asked Amos Alonzo Stagg, Yost's bitter rival at Chicago, who invented the spiral pass. Yost was standing right there. Stagg looked at him and said, Yost, and he invented everything else in the game too, including the football. That was sarcasm, but Yost probably would have agreed. General Robert Neyland was a different kind of obsessive. He was a West Point graduate, a boxer, a baseball pitcher, good enough that the New York Giants offered him a contract, and eventually a brigadier general who served under Douglas MacArthur. He brought military discipline to Tennessee football. His practices ran the same play 500 times until execution was perfect. His teams didn't just win, they suffocated opponents into submission. From November 1938 to December 1939, Tennessee recorded 17 consecutive shutouts, 17 straight games without allowing a point. That record still stands. In 1939, his team went the entire regular season without being scored upon. 212-0 across 10 games. No team has done it since. Neyland developed 7 maxims that his teams recited before every game. The first one, the team that makes the fewest mistakes will win. He prioritized precision over raw athleticism. Speed and strength were secondary to execution. He wanted the team that refused to beat itself. He was known for ending his pregame speeches with a single line, "We will win because they do not have the background." That's pure Neyland. He believed his preparation, his discipline, and his system created an advantage that couldn't be overcome. He wasn't hoping to win. He knew. Paul Bear Bryant, who coached against Neyland 7 times and never beat him, said it plainly. People think I'm the greatest damn coach in the world, but Neyland taught me everything I know. We've been told what Cignetti has done at Indiana is unprecedented. That's not really true. Bud Wilkinson was hired at Oklahoma for the sole purpose of dragging the entire state out of its poverty reputation, a reputation bestowed on them by the Great Depression and John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Bud Wilkinson built something at Oklahoma that may never be matched. 47 consecutive victories from 1953 to 1957. Wilkinson wasn't a screamer like Yost or an authoritarian like Neyland. He was cool, measured, impeccably dressed in soft gray tweeds, with his prematurely gray hair brushed back in dramatic waves. His son once said, "The trouble with Dad is, he'll never say we'll win. It's always going to be a poor year. He's always predicting that we're going to get beat." Sound familiar? Wilkinson used pessimism the same way Dobie did, as a tool, Underneath, the confidence was absolute. The winning or losing, Wilkinson said, is in that intangible factor of mental toughness. He didn't believe in out-scheming opponents. His philosophy was simpler. You get very few victories on tactics. Victories come if you can out-block, out-tackle, and out-fundamental your opponent. And then, quoting his friend Red Sanders, intimidate them physically. Wilkinson's preparation was meticulous to the point of obsession. His scouts would dictate reports to stenographers on Sunday mornings. By Monday, every assistant had a detailed breakdown. By Saturday, Oklahoma knew what was coming before the opponent did. The players felt the weight of that expectation. Clinton Thomas, an All-American halfback, explained it this way. You can't pinpoint it. The guys way back started it, and then it rubs off on you. We go out to win, and we play to win. None of us wants to be on the team that ends this streak. I guess no matter what else you ever did, people would remember that you were on the football team that lost the game that ended the streak. If the coaches of the early 1900s were the architects, Frank Leahy was the high-voltage wire. When Leahy took over Notre Dame in 1941, he didn't just take on the legacy. He executed a hostile takeover. He famously junked the sacred Notre Dame box formation, the system that Knute Rockne had used to build the program, and replaced it with the T formation. He didn't care about tradition or sentiment. He cared about the cold mechanics of a more efficient machine. Leahy was a man of bizarre, unsettling contrasts. In public, he was almost medievally polite, addressing everyone as laddie or master in a soft, melodic voice. But on the practice field, he was a relentless, paranoid perfectionist who treated a missed block like a moral failing. His players didn't just play for him, they were haunted by him. All-American tackle Jim Martin once recalled that the pressure didn't end when the sun went down. You'd be lying in bed at night, Martin said, and you'd hear that soft voice of, Master Martin, are we prepared? It got under your skin and stayed there. Leahy practiced what he called the poor mouth tactic, a psychological whip he used to keep his players in a state of perpetual anxiety. He would stand before a team of future Hall of Famers and describe them as small, weak, and likely to be slaughtered by the opposition. He believed the moment a player felt comfortable was the moment the rot began to set in. The result was a level of discipline that felt less like coaching and more like clinical obsession. All-American center Jerry Groom put it bluntly. He expected perfection in everything. The way you tied your shoes, the way you stood in the huddle. If you weren't a perfectionist, you didn't last long in South Bend. The results were undeniable. From 1946 to 1950, Leahy's Lads went on a 39-game unbeaten streak. But the cost of that perfection was total. Leahy coached with such a manic intensity that it nearly killed him. During a game against Georgia Tech in 1953, he actually collapsed on the sideline, his body shutting down from the sheer nervous tension of maintaining his own standard. He wasn't just coaching a game, he was conducting a high-stakes laboratory experiment where the only acceptable result was total domination. I don't think a man can be a success in anything unless he's willing to pay the price of being a perfectionist. Leahy didn't want potential. He wanted men who were obsessed with the details of a step-over block as he was with the trajectory of the sport. He proved that at the highest level, winning isn't a byproduct of talent. It is a byproduct of an obsession so deep it borders on the clinical. Curt Cignetti was born into the profession. His father, Frank, is in the College Football Hall of Fame. But Cignetti didn't just inherit a name, he studied the blueprint. From 2007 to 2010, he sat in staff meetings at Alabama, absorbing the philosophy of the only modern coach who rivals the ghosts of the past, Nick Saban. I learned a lot from Coach Saban in terms of organization, standards, stopping complacency. I wouldn't be where I am today without my time under Nick. Saban himself noticed Cignetti's quiet intensity. In 2010, when Kent State called looking for head coach recommendations, Saban asked his staff if anyone was interested. It brought me back immediately because I was in that staff meeting, said Mike Vollmer, Alabama's director of football operations at the time. His hand went up immediately. Cignetti didn't get that job, but he got the next one, at Division II Indiana University of Pennsylvania, his father's old program. He took a 60% pay cut to do it. Most people thought he was crazy, Saban included, but Cignetti knew what he was building. He went 54-17 at IUP, then 14-9 at Elon, where he was named Coach of the Year, then 52-9 at James Madison. His phrase at every stop: production over potential. He doesn't care as much about the 5-star recruit who might develop. He demands the proven producer who already has. I'd much rather have a guy that's put it on the field and has statistical numbers, Cignetti said, than a guy that's maybe second or third team at the number one team in the country and has great potential, but he was sitting behind two really good guys. Cignetti arrived at Indiana in December 2023. The cupboard wasn't just bare, it was demolished. 10 offensive starters had entered the transfer portal. 1 defender remained. Just 40 scholarship players were left. By day 3, we had to hit the portal hard, Cignetti said. He brought 13 players from James Madison, players who knew his system and who had already won with him. Then he filled the rest of the roster with transfers who fit his criteria: proven producers, multi-year starters, minimal injury history. Indiana's average player rating was 2.95 stars. Their opponents averaged 3.7 or higher. It didn't matter. The 2024 season was proof of concept. Indiana went 11-2 and made the college football playoff. But the snowball had started rolling. This season, it turned into an avalanche. Each win was more convincing than the last. The point differential kept growing. By October, opposing coaches stopped talking about Indiana as a curiosity. They talked about them as a problem, a team that hit harder in the fourth quarter than the first, a team that broke you down. The Rose Bowl against Alabama was the announcement. This wasn't the same Crimson Tide that Saban built, but it was still Alabama, still the brand, still the expectation of dominance. Indiana won 38-3, Alabama's worst loss since 1998. Afterward, Mikhail Kamara was asked about Alabama's body language in the fourth quarter. "I don't want to say anything crazy," he said, "but we broke them for sure." That's the phrase that connects every dynasty. Yost's opponents were bewildered. Dobie's were ground into submission. Neyland's couldn't score. Wilkinson's knew they couldn't win. Indiana is breaking teams now. Point differential for the season, plus 473, a number that belongs in the dead ball era in 1905, not 2026. The win in Miami was the final piece of evidence. History shows us that maybe every other decade a breaker of systems arrives. They are men like Fielding Yost who realized that relentless execution was more than just a strategy, it was a psychological weapon. They are like General Robert Neyland, who understood that discipline, when applied correctly, is a form of physical suffocation. And they are like Frank Leahy, the mad scientist who proved that a program is only as strong as its smallest, most obsessive detail. These men changed the physics of what was possible at their respective programs. They didn't just win, they were consumed by the details. The way a player breaks the huddle, the way a scout dictates a report, the way a coach watches film on his only day off. Curt Cignetti hasn't just revived Indiana. He has stripped away the culture of a program with a century of failure and replaced it with a lineage of dominance that dates back to the early 1900s. We have a habit in this sport of mocking what we don't understand. When Cignetti stood at that podium back in December 2023 and told the skeptical room to Google him, we all laughed. The national media treated it like a punchline. Doesn't this guy realize he's at Indiana? It felt like a salesman trying to sell front row tickets to a theater that had been empty for 50 years. But if you Google him today, what shows up isn't a quote and it isn't a meme. It's national champion. Cignetti proved that the dynasty mindset isn't tied to a specific decade or a specific blue blood logo. It is a portal, lethal, psychological engine. The 2025 Indiana season wasn't a fluke or a Cinderella story. It was a prophecy fulfilled by a man who knew exactly where his name belongs, alongside the ghosts of the giants. The question now isn't whether Indiana can sustain this. The question is whether the rest of college football is ready for the return of the absolute perfectionist. This is John Johnston with Hardcore College Football History. Thanks for watching. I want to hear from you. We've looked at the greats, Yost, Neyland, Wilkinson, the mad science of Frank Leahy. Which of these legends does Cignetti's Indiana machine resemble most? Or has he built something entirely new? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other history videos, and you might enjoy going to our website where you can click on the timeline feature and see series about the history of early American football or the history of offense. You can learn about the veer, the first triple option offense, or the history of the I formation.